LifeSpring Church. I'm super glad that you're here, either in person or watching online. We are super thankful that you've taken time to be with us today. I've been so excited to get to speak on this subject that we're talking about today. We've been planning for this for months, and I've been just really anticipating it. So thank you so much for being here. We're looking at the question, who is God exactly? Not just who we think He is, not just what other people think He is. Like, we want to really know, who is God exactly? Not just my opinion, not just your opinion, but who is God exactly? What are they like? Can we know them? Are there many gods? Is He a he? Is He a she? What is God like? Who is God like? And so this entire series, we're going to be exploring what I consider to be the most important topic that we can ever wrestle with, and that is, who is God exactly? But first of all, I want to do a little thought experiment. So go ahead, everybody, take out your phones. We'll do something kind of fun together. Take out your phones. Permission to play with your phone in church. So grab your phone out. Here's what I'm going to do. Open up something in your phone that you can type a note in, like notes if you have an iPhone or whatever it is, Android. Pull up something you can type notes in. So in just a second, I'm going to say a word. And when I say this word, I want you to type in the first few things that come to your mind. And don't overthink it. Like, this isn't being graded. Just type the first few things that pop into your mind. Just type it into a document, okay? Letting everybody get ready, get their phones unlocked, get them ready, all right? So here's our word, God. Whatever comes to your mind, just type it in your phone. God. Give you just a few seconds for you slow typers. Any teenagers in the room has already wrote 3 paragraphs. What comes to your mind when you hear the word God? So why are we doing this? A.W. Tozer once said, what comes into our minds when we think about God is the most important thing about us. And I couldn't agree more. What we think about God impacts everything that we do. It impacts who we are. It impacts how we speak, how we live. It impacts our morals. It impacts the purpose to which we live for. It impacts everything. So that's why I believe that this series is so important, guys, because until we realize who God really is, then maybe our lives are misdirected. You see, for some of you in here, you might push back a little bit. You might say, but Mark, I'm not sure I agree with that, because while I believe in God, it doesn't play a very big impact in my life. Like, God, that whole sphere is my religious life or my spiritual life. But then there's the rest of my life. And sure, I like going to church every now and again and singing a little bit and maybe reading my Bible here and there. But that's over here, but it doesn't really impact the rest of my life. You see, even that statement there tells me a lot about how your view of God impacts your entire life. For you, you believe that God must be distant, and in a lot of ways, unknowable. So therefore, He stays in this camp over here, and you live the rest of your life, in a lot of ways, as if He is not real. Sure, maybe He impacts your life. Maybe you follow certain moral codes that you have gathered from your belief in Him. But for the most part, He doesn't impact your life. You see, but that very fact alone dictates how you live your life, right? How about for some of you in here who may come in here today, I don't know where everyone's coming from, maybe you have a hard time believing in God. Like maybe you find yourself maybe either an atheist or an agnostic. You're not real sure what to believe about God. And so your pushback would be, well, I'm not sure that's true, Mark, because I'm not even sure I believe in God. But get this, even that view impacts the way you live. For instance, if you don't believe in God, then you have a very difficult time establishing that there is an absolute morality, that there is this moral code that we should live by, because if there is no God, then who's to say what is right or wrong? Or if you don't believe in God, then you don't have a purpose really to live for, because if there is no God, then we're all accidentally here, and if we're all accidentally here, then we live and die, and that's it. There really is no big purpose to your life. So even if you don't believe in God and you're watching this morning or you're here in person, that view of God impacts the way you live your life. Or say you come from a background more of the Eastern religion mindset where you believe in many gods. I can almost guarantee, even though I've never met you, that most of your life has probably been spent walking on eggshells, because the many different gods that you believe in has you trying to live your life in such a way that you live where you please each one of them in each of their respective areas. So our view of God deeply impacts how we live our life, no matter what your view is. But the question then is who is right? Like, who's right? If everyone has a view of God, who has it right? Do I have it right? Do others have it right? Who is right? So this question of who is God exactly is trying to get to the bottom of that question of who is right and who really is God. Now, before we go any further, I do want to kind of let you guys know up front, there's no way that we can truly, fully answer the question, who is God exactly, in 4 weeks, is there? There's no way. The goal of this sermon series over the next 4 weeks is to do two things. To hopefully provide some really helpful, tangible nuggets for you to understand about who God is exactly. But two, I hope that it whets your appetite so that you want to know more about this God that we're going to talk about. So let's dig in. So all throughout the series, we're going to be having a series-long illustration. Okay, so if you track with us the entire series, which I would highly recommend, because each week is going to build on each other, and if you miss one, it's going to be a little clunky. So highly recommend, if you can't be here, watch online, just try to stay caught up with the series. But this entire series, I want to set us up a scenario. Okay, so you guys go here with me for just a moment. Picture that you were born in a room. And some of you have heard me use this illustration somewhat before, so just go with me here. But picture you were born in a room, say similar to this one. But say there were no doors, no windows, no way out. You have always lived in this room. This room is all that you've ever known. Let's say one day, one of you were to walk up and say, I wonder if there's anything outside of this room. Well, that's a decent question, right? And let's say you go to the wall and you start to knock on the wall and you say, well, I don't really hear anything when I knock on the wall, so I don't think there's anything outside of this room. And let's say another one of you lays down on the floor and you put your ear to the floor and you start to listen and you say, well, I'm not sure. It sounds like something might be going on down there. And then maybe one of you climbs up on a ladder and you listen to the ceiling and you have your guess on whether there's something outside. At the end of the day, though, does anyone really know if there's anything outside of the room? We don't, because none of us have ever been before. So it's simply speculation. Now, at the same time, we can't necessarily say that any one of us is wrong. You can't say, well, I know that you're wrong because I know the truth. We don't know the truth. So everyone's opinion is equally valid, right? You follow me? But let's say the scenario changes just a little bit one day. Let's say you're in the room and all of a sudden a saw starts to cut the ceiling. And then someone drops in a painting into the room. Now this changes the scenario quite a bit, doesn't it? One, it tells us there's something out there because he just cut a hole in the ceiling, right? Number two, we have a painting now to look at. From whatever's out there, we have a painting to study, to look at, to observe, to learn from. It's a completely different scenario now, right? See, many people, and maybe some of you in here, we think of the world as this big room that we're born into, that we live in, that we have lots of questions about, but the questions of whether or not there's something outside of the world, i.e. God, i.e. an afterlife, we come to this place where we think there's no way of really knowing, and so we just settle for not knowing. Either you settle for apathy, or you settle for saying, well, I follow my beliefs, but you follow your beliefs, let's all be happy, and they're all correct at the end of the day. So we believe that no one really knows. But guess what? If someone were to cut a hole in the roof and drop in a painting, that changes the game up. Changes it up. Read with me here just for a second. The very first verse of the Bible claims to be that painting. Genesis chapter 1, verse 1. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Now, if you don't know anything about God, again, if you're coming to this with fresh eyes, you would have to ask some questions about this verse, right? Like, who is this God? What's he like? Where is he? There's all kinds of questions that would come up at an initial reading of this verse. We would essentially be asking, what's on the painting? If this were the painting that was dropped into us, I need to understand more, right? I want more details. First of all, let's look at this painting more closely, okay? Because I believe there's some details in this painting that are very helpful for us to understand who is God exactly. First of all, the word God used here in the very first verse of the Bible, this isn't a proper name. It isn't like when you say Mark or John or whatever. It's not a proper name. It's more of a general term, kind of like when you use the word mom. The word mom can describe anyone who's ever had a child, right? But if I were to say Mark's mom, then that's more specific, right? So this word that's used here is a word in the original language called Elohim, okay? Hebrew word, Elohim. In fact, repeat it after me, Elohim. Elohim. Now you feel smart because you know a Hebrew word, okay? I don't know Hebrew either. I learned from other smart people, okay? So don't be fooled. So what does Elohim mean? Elohim is actually more of a general term that describes a spiritual being. It's not necessarily narrowing this down to one specific person. So when we look at this verse, we have to ask some questions about Elohim. What can we learn about this Elohim, this spiritual being, from the very first verse, the first painting that he drops off to us? First of all, it says that he created the heavens and the earth. Now this is significant because we can read our own thinking into this verse, but what actually this phrase, the heavens and the earth, means in the Bible is everything. The heavens being everything out there, the earth being everything down here. This phrase, the heavens and the earth, is used quite a bit in the Old Testament of the Bible, and it's described as everything. So Elohim created everything. Significant detail for us to understand who Elohim is. But get this. The way that we're talking about, let's back up for one second. The way that we're talking about understanding God is uniquely how God has revealed himself to our generation. Let me show what I mean. At the very beginning of time, if you were to read a few verses later, the first man and woman ever created was Adam and Eve by Elohim. When he created them, they walked perfectly with God. They experienced God like no one has since and like no one will until you see God again. They experienced him perfectly. So they didn't have the same perception that we do because they could absolutely experience him to the full extent because they were with him. However, something happened in the life of Adam and Eve that changed the whole game up. Adam and Eve chose to rebel against God. When they chose to rebel against God, a couple of very significant things happened. One, sin entered into the world. That act of rebellion is what the Bible describes as sin. And that did two significant things. It does a lot more, but two significant things that we'll point out this morning. One, it separated them from God. Sin cannot be in the presence of God. He's perfect. Sin is the opposite of perfect. They cannot be together. Secondly, sin served as blinders to Adam and Eve and to every single generation that would follow them. And so, while Adam and Eve had a perfect opportunity and they had a perfect perception of God because they were with him and they were one with him, every generation since Adam and Eve has been wearing these blinders and they've been separated from God. So that's the reason we even have to ask the question today is who is God exactly? Because all of us from day one, from the time we're born with a sin nature that taints our ability to be able to see who God really is. So, it makes it necessary, follow me, it makes it necessary for God to choose to reveal himself to us, to drop a painting in the room, so on and so forth. Because we on our own can't see God for who he really is. So it requires him revealing himself to us. Now, many of you are probably wondering why I have binoculars up here. I use these binoculars to spot deer and everything else, but my boys have since ruined them, so they don't really work anymore. But they work great for an illustration, okay? Love having kids, right? So, these binoculars, if you want to see something, you put them up to your eyes, And if you have them on the wide angle view, you'll get a big picture view of everything out there, right? But if you want to see the details of something, what do you have to do? You've got to zoom in. It's got this little thing in the middle here on this one where you can zoom in. And the more and more you zoom in, the clearer and clearer the object becomes, the more details that you find out about the object, right? This is how God has chosen to reveal himself to us. When you read the Bible, he has chosen to progressively reveal himself to us. First from the wide angle, understanding a big picture of who he is. But over time, more and more and more zoomed in. So this series that we're going through, picture yourselves looking through a set of binoculars. Today we're taking a wide angle view of who God is, and each week that passes, we're going to zoom in a couple more notches. And by the end, week 4 is going to be awesome. Just warning you, okay? So this will be really good. So this is how God has chosen to reveal himself to us. And if you were to continue to read these first few chapters in Genesis, you would find out more about Elohim being the creator. So as we look at this painting, though, what else can we learn about Elohim being the creator? So first of all, Elohim is not only the creator of all things, but he created everything out of nothing. There was nothing to create from. He created everything out of nothing. Like, I can't wrap my mind around that. I can't. Like, I don't know how he does that, but he did it. He created everything out of nothing. Now get this, not only did he create the stuff, what scientists call matter, but he created the space to which they operate within. And not only did he create the space to which they operate within, he created the time in which they operate within. So at the very beginning, God created stuff or matter, he created time, and he created space. Now this is huge. Because for most of us, if you're like me at least, I'm not the smartest guy in the world, I can't even imagine a world or anything where nothing existed. Because all I've ever known is stuff and time and space, right? Think about it like this. Some of you in here are a little more artsy than others. Hopefully I brought some good pumpkins in, by the way. Some of you are more artsy than others. So sometimes maybe you take a notion to make artsy stuff. Maybe you use Play-Doh. I don't know what you use because I'm not artsy. But maybe you make something out of Play-Doh. So maybe one day you say, I'm going to make a beautiful house out of this Play-Doh. And so you take the Play-Doh out and you start to form it. And after some time, man, you've got a really cool looking Play-Doh house. Not a trick question here. What was necessary in order to build that house? Stuff, right? The Play-Doh. It was necessary. Not only that, what else was necessary? The space, the table to which you created it on. What else was necessary? The time in which you create it within. You see how this works? Everything that we use as our canvas in life was created by Elohim. He created it all. I don't know how he did it, but he did it. So here comes the age-old question. Well then, Mark, who created God if you're so smart, right? And that is actually a really good question. I'm being a little sarcastic, but I used to wonder the same question. That question kept me up many nights. But get this, think about it with me. If Elohim created everything, he created space, he created time, he created matter or stuff, then guess what? Everything he created is, by nature, it has a starting point, right? It is a created thing. It has a starting point. And if Elohim created everything that has a beginning, guess what we can say true about him? He doesn't have a beginning. By nature, Elohim must be eternally existing in the past, or must have existed eternally in the past. Because if there was a starting point to Elohim, guess what he would be? Just like us, he would be a part of creation. But since he sets himself apart as being the one who created everything that exists, he himself, by definition, has existed forever. And if he did not, he therefore would not be God. God, and I might be losing some of you, you're thinking, man, we're going deep here. It's all right, just track with me. God, by definition, must have existed forever in eternity past, and therefore must exist forever in eternity future. If that is not the definition of Elohim, then he's not really God. He's a created being, just like you and I. Might just look different. But Elohim claims to be the eternal God who existed forever this way and forever this way. All right? Let's keep going here. I get it, by the way. I get that some of you, especially if you come in here and you have questions about whether God exists or not, you probably have pushed back here a little bit and you say, okay, that makes sense. It sounds logical. But how do you know that God exists? How do we know? How do you know that painting's real? How do you know that the Bible is accurate? Those type of things. First of all, the Bible accuracy question, we don't have time to dig into today, but if you want to talk more, I'd love to talk to you about that. But this whole idea of does God exist is a legitimate question, a legitimate concern. There's tons of different evidences to support that he actually exists. I get that perspective. I used to be highly skeptical myself. But what I discovered is that there are tons of evidence to support God's existence. Now, we don't have time this series to unpack a lot of them, but let me give you one small one that will just whet your appetite today. Did you know that the earth and everything in it, including our bodies, is made with the utmost precision and accuracy? To the very details of who we are made in a certain specific way that makes it possible for us to have life on earth and for us to be breathing, living people. Let me give you something here that you may not be familiar with at all. But the earth is governed by these laws that scientists call constants. Constants. Give you a little quick science class. Constants are things that govern the world in which we live in, and they never change. That's why they're called constants. They never change. They're different forces and different things that never change. Let me give you an example here if you're not familiar with this idea. One of them that most of us are familiar with is gravity, right? We all have heard of gravity. Now, gravity is what's considered a constant. It's always been the same way from our understanding from the very beginning till now. That gravity is 9.8 meters per second squared. That's how much force is pulling down on us at all times. And it's never changed. Now, some of you may think it's changed, especially as you get a little older. It starts to weigh you down a little bit more, but that's actually too many cheeseburgers, not necessarily gravity changing. But that's another story for another day. So gravity has never changed. Now, get this about gravity. If gravity were adjusted just a smidgen higher or just a smidgen lower, guess what? Life would not be possible. Our bodies would either explode or fall apart if gravity was either just a smidgen higher or just a smidgen lower. You want to know what else is really, really cool? There are 26 of these constants. Gravity is just one of them. 26 of these constants that govern the way our universe operates that are fine-tuned precisely for life. If the dial were turned just a smidgen in either direction, life would not be possible. Tell me there's not a God, right? Like that should blow our minds when you study science and you see just how finely tuned the universe is. There has to be a God. Now, there are lots of different other reasons to believe in God, and actually, I'm going to lay out a few and provide some really cool resources this week in our newsletter. So if you're not subscribed to our newsletter already, you can subscribe easily. If you're here in person, you can stop by our information desk, or you can email us at our general email inbox, which is hello@lifespringnc.com. hello@lifespringnc.com. We'd love to get you on our newsletter. I'm going to lay out a few other reasons that I believe are good reasons to believe that God exists. Now, by the way, this reason and other reasons, they do support God's existence, but it doesn't necessarily tell us much about who God is. In fact, I would argue that what's required, what's necessary, is an outside source to help us understand who God is. This is what the Bible is to us. It's an outside source that God has chosen to give to us over time to reveal to us who exactly He is. Look with me in another passage in the Bible that there's a guy who's reflecting on who Elohim is. Psalm 33, verse 6 through 9 says this: "By the word of the Lord the heavens were made, their starry host by the breath of His mouth. He gathers the waters of the sea into jars. He puts the deep into storehouses. Let all the earth fear the Lord." Let all the people of the world revere him, for he spoke, and it came to be. He commanded, and it stood firm. You see, the psalmist, as he is reflecting on this creator God, Elohim, he's brought to a place of awe, right? Like, who in the world could create something so vast and something so awesome? This God deserves to be praised. But not only that, look at what he says, if you remember what he says in verse 8. He says that we should fear him. We should fear him. You see, if Elohim created everything that has ever existed, and he has existed forever in the past and forever in the future, guess what that means? If he created it, he can also end it. Just like some of your mamas told you, like mine told me, boy, I brought you into this world, what? I could take you out of it, right? So when we have a proper understanding of who Elohim is, we should have a place of fear in there because he's so vast. He's the one in control. But get this, Elohim just isn't some disconnected being who created all. Look with me just a few verses later in Genesis. Genesis 1, verse 3 through 5. And I specifically had these verses, or some words in these verses underlined to make a point, so follow along. And God said, let there be light. And there was light. Verse 4. God saw that the light was good. And what? And he separated the light from the darkness. Look at verse 5. God called the light day, and the darkness he called night. See, this is the very beginning. This is on that initial painting we were talking about. This is the 3rd, 4th, 5th verses of the Bible. We see here not an impersonal force, not a blob who created all things. We see a personal God who is knowable. You see the way he's interacting as he describes his creation. He is a personal God that we can understand and that we can know. Now this is significant, guys, because if we view God as just some blob or impersonal force, then we've missed who he really is. So if we want to know who God is exactly, we have to realize he's not just this force that created all things. He is a personal, knowable creator God. But get this. We read this in the context as we continue to read, but there's also this inference in the word Elohim, that this Elohim, this God that created, he also is not only the creator, he also is the one who sustains all things. So everything, even now, is held together by Elohim. So this is significant because not only is Elohim far bigger than we can ever imagine, he created everything we see, but also he is personable, he is knowable, and he is the provider and sustainer of all life. Guys, this is huge if we want to understand who God is. In fact, our big takeaway for today, if you want to write this down, God is the personal creator and sustainer of all things who has existed forever. God is the personal creator and sustainer of all things who has existed forever. If we want to know who God is exactly, this is the first thing he wants us to know about him in the Bible. Notice I underlined the word the, or the, depending on where you're from. The signifies that there's only one. Nowhere in this account does it describe there being more than one God. God is referred to in the plural, which describes the Trinity, but we're not going to go there today. But there's one God, one creator, one sustainer of all things. This is huge for us to know. Because again, if we go back to our A.W. Tozer quote from the very beginning, how we think about God is the most important part of who we are. It's the most important thing about us. So we have to understand that God is the one creator, personal God, the sustainer of all things who's existed forever. Now, as we wrestle with this question, who is God exactly, we're going to be laying out who God is exactly over the next few weeks. But I don't want you to miss why it's significant. Because it'd be easier to leave here today and feel like maybe you're a little smarter, maybe not, I don't know. But it'd be easy to live here and not let it impact your life. But this truth should greatly impact all of our lives. Let me give you a few examples here. First of all, if God is creator and I am his creation, then all questions pertaining to this life and the afterlife find their answers in him. They have to. He's the creator of all things. All questions pertaining to life and the afterlife have to find their answers in them. Think about if you were to go to Best Buy or Walmart or wherever is your place of shopping, and you were to pick up a new technological device, okay? If you want to learn how to use that thing, what's the best way to do it? Some of you would say, just play with it. You don't need instructions. That's one way, okay? But the best way is to look at the instructions, right? Because someone who made that thing wrote those instructions to help you understand it. And if you don't look at them, you're going to be hard-pressed to figure it out. In much the same way, how do you expect to answer the big questions of life and about the afterlife if you don't go to the one who created it all? Right? Doesn't make sense, does it? Number two, if God is the creator of everything, we can start to see how foolish it is to live as if we are the center of the universe. You see, each one of us are born with this default mode. We want to be the center of our own universe, don't we? We can be honest. We're born wanting to be the center of our own universe. You see, this, at the heart of it, is sin, is what sin is. See, every one of us is born with this natural inclination to be our own God, if I can use that phrase. We want to be the center of our own universe. We want to be the sustainer of our own life. But guess what? I think that most of us have probably realized we ain't too good at that, are we? We're not. So God clearly shows us that he really is the only one who can be the center of your universe. And get this, since he is the creator, he's the only one who deserves to be the center of your universe. And for us, this is a place that all of us have to get to where we realize that we can't be the God of our own lives. We can't be the Lord of our own lives. He's the only one who deserves to be there, and he's the only one who has the power to be there. Number three, if God is creator of everything, he would not have created you without a purpose. He would not have created anything without a purpose. So for those of you in the room this morning or online today who are watching and you're finding yourself wondering, does my life have any purpose? Don't believe the lie that you don't. God has created you with such precision. He knows the number of hairs on your head. He created your eye color. He created everything unique that's unique about you. And he creates with a purpose when he creates. So don't ever believe the lie that your life doesn't matter, because as long as you have breath in your lungs, the sustainer of life who gives you that breath, he has a purpose for you. And I believe there's no coincidence, and I believe that if you're engaging with us online today or if you're here in person, that God wants you to step into that purpose if you haven't already. He wants you to know that you are far more valuable than anything to him, that he loves you. Think about it. He didn't have to cut the hole in the roof. He didn't have to reveal himself to us. We could have lived a life with blinders on and never known who he is exactly, but he has chosen to reveal himself to us. And we're going to find out over the next few weeks that as his progressive revelation happens, if I can use that word, as he continues to show us who he is, we see more clearly that he deeply loves us. He deeply loves us. And he's not okay with leaving us in the state that we're in, born in sin, separated from him, with blinders on. He wants us to know him. He wants us to experience him. He wants us to experience his love and to carry his love to the world. So this whole question of who is God exactly, it's important. It's so important because it's going to impact every single one of your lives to the very core of who you are. So my prayer, and I've been praying this for some time now, is that God would use this series to change your life and that you encounter him in a fresh, new way, maybe for the first time, maybe today, maybe over the next few weeks. Because I believe as God shows you more clearly who he is, it changes everything about us. I want to say this right quick before we close in prayer. I am just covering the tip of the iceberg today. And I get that some of you probably have a lot of questions. So a couple of things I'll say to that. First of all, it's a good reason to stay tuned in for the series. But secondly, if you need to talk to someone, let us know. Like, let me know. You can hang out with me afterwards. We can chat. Because here's the thing. There's more to come that's going to rock your world. Primarily who Jesus is and why He came and how it relates to God. It's going to rock your world. So if you have questions about that, come talk. We'd love to talk. Love to help you with those. But secondly, stay engaged. Read more. Read the Genesis account this week. Read those first few chapters and learn more, because I believe that God wants to show Himself to you in a real way. He is the personal and knowable God, and He wants to know you. Would you guys pray with me? God, we are so thankful that You chose to cut a hole in the roof, that You chose to reveal Yourself to us. We don't deserve it. We deserve to be alienated from You for life. We don't even deserve to have life, to be honest. But God, You so graciously give us life. And You so graciously show us who You are. So God, I pray for every person in this room, and I pray for every person who's watching online today, that God, You would show us who You are. Would You become our God? Not just a God, not just something we think about in an abstract way, but the personal God of the universe. Would You become real to us? Would You help us to see who we are and that we have value in Your sight? Would You help us to see our purpose? God, and we are trusting You as a church. As You change people's lives through this series, through Your revealed truth of who You are, God, I pray that You would take this information and take it to the surrounding town of Smithfield and Selma and Wilson Mills and Clayton and so on and so forth, Lord. Would Your glory spread throughout the earth through this church as we live for You, as we love all people, and as we lead others to do the same. I pray this in Jesus' name. Amen. Thank you so much for joining us today with LifeSpring Church Online. I'm Mark. I'm one of the pastors here at LifeSpring, and I'm super thrilled that you joined us today. If you found today's message helpful, by the way, take a minute, share it with a friend, invite someone to join you next week to come back as we continue to offer hope week after week with LifeSpring Church Online. Specifically, if you're new, I want to give you a big shout out and say thank you so much for joining us. We believe that God has truly made you unique, and God has made you to be a difference maker. And one of our goals at LifeSpring Church is to help you step into that reality. What does it look like for you to become the difference maker that God has wired you to be? So if there's any way that we can help you, we would love to do so. By the way, if you're not following us on Facebook, before you get off your phone or tablet today or your laptop, take a minute, follow us on Facebook. We would love to connect with you that way and let you stay in touch with what's going on through LifeSpring Church and how God's working in our community. At LifeSpring, we say this all the time, but we truly believe it, that God has called us to make a difference in our community. And we believe that the way that will happen is as we live for God, as we love all people, and as we lead others to do the same. And we gather together every week so that we can be sent back out. So at this time, LifeSpring Church, you are sent.